concert with the pyramids. Lubricant sleds would help the laborers move and maneuver the blocks. The single ramp theory, one for each side, is doubted because by the time upper levels were reached, the final ramp would consume more material, labor and space than the pyramid itself. And the theory posed to Herodotus that a system of levers was used is dismissed by those who claim the process would have been too slow. Another explanation of how the heavier stones might have been is forwarded by Dr. William Tiller, professor of physics at Stanford University.
Here we have gravitational forces where things, if you drop them, will fall to the floor. There could be the utilization of levitational forces, where if you have an object, you can cause it to be raised in the air without touching it physically. And maybe the Egyptians, some way, had that technology so that they could levitate the blocks off the ground and move them more easily and put them in place.
We may not know how it was built 5,000 years ago, but it was. Encased with a smooth layer of polished limestone, sealing off the tomb from the living for eternity, Cheops had constructed a tribute to his real and spiritual self, never equaled by any other man. One authority, however, doesn't believe it all worked quite this way. We are in Oxford, England, at the home of Kurt Mendelssohn, Professor Emeritus of Physics at the university, and author of The Riddle of the Pyramids.
Well, you see, there's something odd about the about the pyramid age as a whole. It lasted for just a little over a century. It was an enormous effort, which suddenly started and petered out. Pharaohs had been buried before, much more cheaply. Afterwards, in the small pyramid, much more cheaply. Why was all this effort? And possibly the answer to that is in overlapping buildings.
Dr. Mendelssohn contends that several pyramids were under construction at all times. That the early one at Meidum wasn't completed because it collapsed due to engineering miscalculations. That the disaster here forced the architects at Dashur to change the angle of King Sneferu's second pyramid in mid-construction. Mendelssohn believes the pharaohs used the pyramid projects as a means of removing political power from the individual villages and concentrating it in one place, causing the creation of a federal bureaucracy.
With the pyramid building escalating and continuing all the time, it was not the main thing that he should be buried there, but that the pyramid should be built. In fact, as things went on, with this enormous effort, both in workers and in the civil service, it was probably the pyramid rather than the pharaoh that ruled Egypt. The pyramid project ran Egypt and not the pharaoh.
He's a very fine scholar, and he's got some very innovative ideas about the pyramids, but he sort of has the concept that the pyramids were built as a kind of works project for the Egyptians, like our own WPA.
Dr. William Kelly Simpson is curator of the Egyptian section of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts.
Always changing the exact position. I think this is probably backwards in a way. I think they created the state before that, and having developed the bureaucracy, they were then able to go on and build these monuments to their former rulers, and this was a very important part of their religion.
Giza is the site where several generations of pharaohs built their seemingly impregnable tombs. Today it is a rapidly growing suburb of Cairo. But despite appearances, it's unlikely these three pyramids will be swallowed by the city, for several reasons. They are national monuments, the only remaining wonder of the ancient world's original seven. The Great Pyramid itself, of course, is the main magnet for travelers. and tourism has become Egypt's second major source of income. Not long ago, however, only the elite or most adventurous would make the difficult journey to this distant land. Ulysses S. Grant was undaunted by the obstacles, as were countless ladies and gentlemen, mainly from England, who felt confident in this exotic place with the knowledge their army was also present, at the request of the Egyptian government. The advent of air travel and 20th century wars brought other notables to pay their respects at Giza. Churchill and Roosevelt met here. Jack Benny fiddled for the troops. Later, Chu Enlai would express great admiration for a culture even more ancient than his own. Not long ago, Henry Kissinger saw the interior chambers of the Great Pyramids, much as they appeared to Napoleon in the 18th century. The Great Pyramid is accessible to everyone now, and clearly its attraction has only increased with time. Great Pyramid, an eminent archaeologist once observed, it is to be compared to the finest optician's work on a scale of acres. Fully appreciate its volume, there is enough stone in this pyramid to build a wall 6 feet high and a foot wide from Los Angeles to New York. 2.5 million stones, 450 feet into the sky. But perhaps as impressive, certainly more baffling, is the how and why of its incredible interior. According to Muslim tradition, the first known entry was made in the 9th century AD by Caliph al-Ma'mun, who forced his way in here, 10 courses below the original entrance, which obviously was then sealed up. In search of rumored treasure and scientific data, al-Ma'mun and his men tunneled 100 feet into solid rock by firing the stones, quickly dousing them with cold vinegar, then cracking them with battering rams. On the verge of giving up, the distant noise of a heavy falling object altered their direction and brought them eventually to a bat-infested chamber which should have held the king's tomb. But it was totally empty, unfinished in fact. Making their way back, they again had to circumvent giant stone blocks possibly loosened during an earthquake. They then discovered what is so unique to the Great Pyramid. The Grand Gallery ascends 157 feet at a steep angle of 26 degrees. The walls are 28 feet high, comprised of 7 courses of polished limestone, an architectural marvel to this day. At the top, one crouches, then enters what is generally agreed to be King Cheops' tomb. All who have followed Al-Ma'mun into this strange room would find the king's chamber devoid of any object, save an empty granite sarcophagus. Was Cheops actually buried here? How did the ancients build this chamber? Why was it the only one in any pyramid so far above ground level? How could it have been plundered? Of all the unsolved riddles of the pyramid, the king's chamber is perhaps the most provocative. Compounded by the later discovery of air shafts and 5 granite beams weighing some estimate 70 tons each. In 1794, after a victorious battle against the Mamluks, Napoleon made the arduous climb up the passageways to see the king's chamber for himself. Legend has it that he came out pale and shaken, And when asked about the experience, he replied he never wanted the incident mentioned again. Meanwhile, Edmé Jomard, a young scholar in Napoleon's service, was making the first complete survey of the pyramid's dimensions. To his astonishment, he found many that seemed to relate to the system of measurements presently in use for calculating geographical and astronomical information. The French Academy dismissed his findings as irrational. Not the least remarkable aspect of this major civilization is how long its history has remained a total enigma to the rest of the world. It seems incredible that the key to it was discovered less than 200 years ago, and that the study of science called Egyptology is even younger. This key to ancient Egyptian history was found in 1799. Called the Rosetta Stone, it would be another 20 years before Jean-François Champollion would match the hieroglyphic writing at the top, the known languages of Greek and Coptic, in the identical passages below. Unfortunately, there was no writing from the Pyramid Age to translate. However, in the mid-19th century, an observation was made about the Great Pyramid, which became a focal point of the controversy that is with us to this day. John Taylor, editor of the London Observer, was stunned by what he concluded must have been more than a coincidence. The base of the Great Pyramid is nearly square, 755 feet on a side. One of the most vital formulas in mathematics is a circle's circumference divided by its diameter. This ratio is used to find the area of any circle and is called pi, which is 3.1416. When Taylor used the perimeter of the Great Pyramid as a circumference and 2 times its height for the diameter, it equaled 3.144. A precise definition of pi had always been attributed to the Greeks 2,000 years later. Had the Egyptians known it as well?
Is the angle at the Cheops pyramid given by pi? And it is, to a very great accuracy. Did the Egyptians therefore know pi? No, I don't think they did.
The Egyptians were perfectly acquainted with the relation pi.